Monday, August 5th. Today, British observers say the attempted Nazi invasion of the British Isles may come at any day. The tides in the English Channel now are right for any attempted invasion. And in Norway, new military activities are reported. And United Press says the German officials there have set aside the August 8th to 10th period as the so-called zero hour. But now the news from Europe Direct, London, Berlin, and Rome. First, the news from the British capital reported by Larry Lesseur. Go ahead, London.
This is London, and the Japanese situation is still boiling. It was announced here that 4 more Japanese businessmen have been arrested by British authorities at Singapore and Rangoon. At the same time, it was announced that 3 of the Britons held in Japan on spying charges had been released. In London, it is again emphasized that the British action, which began on Saturday with the arrest in London of 2 prominent Japanese businessmen, is in no sense a retaliation for the arrest of British subjects in Japan. In some London quarters last night, it was urged that Britain would be justified in taking further precautionary actions. While in Kobe, a special Chamber of Commerce meeting resolved that Britain should reconsider the arrests and urged that the Japanese ministers of war, the Navy, and Commerce take a firm stand. It is said here that the British deportation orders against 2 Japanese subjects, one of them a woman, were made 3 weeks ago before the Japanese began to arrest British subjects. These deportation orders are lodged against a member of the Bank of Formosa and the German-born wife of a Japanese. In the House of Commons today or tomorrow, a government statement is expected on the Japanese situation. There are conflicting reports in London today of more changes in the government. Some politicians believe that the appointment of Lord Beaverbrook, Minister for Aircraft Production and publisher of the London Daily Express, is only the first of several government changes which Mr. Churchill has in view. However, other sources state that a reconstruction of the government is unlikely for the present. The losses by the German Air Force, accomplished by the Royal Air Force or anti-aircraft guns since the war began, have been figured at 2,661 planes, whose crews amounted to 10,000 men, including pilots, observers, and gunners. Whether this number includes the 400 airmen shot down by the Royal Air Force during the invasion of France and released when France surrendered is not stated. Last night and early today, more scattered air raids took place over Britain. High explosive and fire bombs fell on a few isolated districts in the Midland and eastern England. Damage is said to be negligible, and the few casualties, only one was fatal. Corn and other crops were damaged by fire bombs, but whether these crops were the actual target of the bombers is not known. 3 German fighters were knocked down this morning. 1 British aircraft is missing. And I've just learned that the American Lockheed planes have completed their first 1,000,000 miles of flying for the Royal Air Force. Britain is getting accustomed to learning from neutral sources that new dates have been set by the Germans for the invasion. The latest whisper is said to come from German officials in Norway, to the effect that the offensive will start sometime between August 8th and August 10th. The succession of rumors regarding invasion is believed here to be part of the German propaganda war of nerves. On the other hand, in the German and Italian press, inspired stories have appeared, possibly designed for home consumption, that a sudden attack on England, such as had been delivered against France, is impossible. Military experts here say that they don't need to have a date fixed by neutral sources for the possible German invasion. They declare that they will know when it's going to start because of the big-scale German air offensives which will herald it. They think that the only explanation of the lightness of the German air effort in the past few weeks is the building up of reserves, such as fuel for aircraft and crews to man them. Because an invasion of England would have to be preceded by a heavy bombing preparation, repeated many times. Britain is taking no chances with her big bridges, over which the fast trains to run from England to Scotland. As a precaution against sabotage, no passengers in trains crossing the Great Firth of Forth Bridge and the one over the Tay will be allowed to carry anything larger than a small weekend bag. The rest of their luggage must be placed in the baggage car, where it can be examined by the guards. Last night's speech by General Pershing urging that the United States send Britain 50 of her obsolete destroyers was naturally well received over here. But only a few of the London newspapers devoted any space at all to Colonel Lindbergh's peace rally in Chicago. We return you now to CBS in New York.
That was Larry Lesseur reporting from London. In Vichy, France, it is reported without confirmation today that the exiled Belgian government of Premier Perlot, which came to France after King Leopold's surrender, has proposed a joint resignation to Leopold. At the same time, a political amnesty is sought to permit some members to return to Belgium. Now the news reported from the German capital by William L. Schara.
Berlin. The Bayzet am Mittag tells us this noon that the entire world press regards this week as a crucial one. Meaning, I take it, that the long-awaited attack on Britain may begin before the week is up. Well, it may be. And we all know by this time that Germany is pretty good at concealing its 0 hours for the big takeoffs. But I must say there is no evidence around Berlin that this is to be the crucial week. Before the Scandinavian campaign, before the big offensive in the West, there was tension in the air in Berlin. You don't feel that tension here just at the moment. An awful lot of people seem to be vacationing this week. Some people here think that the German Air Force has to do a great deal more work on Britain before there is any question of an attempt at invasion by a great land army. That is to say, British harbor works, oil stores, landing fields, anti-aircraft positions must first be well liquidated before an attack by the tanks and troops is feasible. Obviously, that as yet has not been accomplished in Britain. No one here pretends that it has. This strategy was outlined to us yesterday in an article in the Völkische Beobachter, the official party organ, signed by Arminius, which is Latin for Herman, a very well-known first name in these parts. The author developed the idea that the first job of an air force is to gain complete superiority in the air by destroying the other fellow's airfields, hangars, planes, oil stores, and anti-aircraft nests. That over, the second phase begins when the Air Force can devote most of its energies to supporting the land army. This strategy was followed in Poland and in the West. Presumably, it's a strategy to be used in Britain. The only question is this: why hasn't the German Luftwaffe attacked Britain on a bigger scale, since we know it's superior in numbers? The German press itself tells us that what Britain has experienced so far has only been a taste of what will come later when the war really gets serious. It's announced this morning in Berlin that Herr Hitler has named Herr Otto Abetz, until now a plenipotentiary of the German Foreign Office attached to the office of the military commander in France, as a full-fledged ambassador. Herr Abetz, it will be remembered, was expelled from Paris last summer, the French government accusing him of fifth column activity. He actually brought suit against the government and certain Paris editors for defamation, but the suit never came to trial. When I went to Paris recently on the heels of the German army, Herr Abetz was back in the French capital where he was in charge of the German embassy. What the nature of his new job is to be is not stated here. Herr Abetz had a wide circle of friends in Paris, both in political and literary circles. The Schwellvorblatt front pages of Washington Dispatch today to the effect that Senator Lundin is trying to start a third party which will fight the so-called interventionist policies of the two major American parties. The Dispatch is published without comment, but its position on the first page is interesting. Washington dispatches and the German newspapers also pay considerable attention to the opposition in the United States to conscription. It's a subject which interests a nation which has built up the world's best army by conscription. I notice the Berlin press this morning also makes a lot of the New York Dispatch, which tells us that in England, the German pamphlets containing Hitler's Reichstag speech are so sought after by the people that they're selling for 10 shillings now. The German Dispatch takes that as a sign of the real interest among the English to know the true situation. The British people, it says, have not been informed of this. French coal miners are working again. Apparently they were not destroyed, the coal mines, by the French as they were in 1914. A photograph in one of the morning papers shows French miners unloading coal at a pit. Watching over them is a steel-helmeted German soldier. This is William L. Schara in Berlin, returning now to Colby, New York.
This is New York. Now we switch you to the Italian capital for the report of Cecil Brown. Go ahead, Rome.
This is Rome. The biggest air battle since Italy entered the war 2 months ago was fought yesterday in the skies of Libya in North Africa. The Italian High Command has just announced 10 British planes were shot down in the violent engagement. According to the war communique, a strong formation of Foster fighters and Blenheim bombers attacked Italian native troops on the march along the border between Libya and Egypt. The indications are that the native troops were moving into position. A formation of fascist attack and fighter planes went up to meet the enemy. The fight is described by the High Command as fierce and extremely vigorous. The bulletin says 7 Gloucester machines and 3 Blenheim bombers were shot down. The communique claims that
Ladies and gentlemen, we regret that due to transmission difficulties, there has been an interruption in the program coming to you from Rome, the reports of the latest news by Cecil Brown. Until such time as we recontact Mr. Brown, we bring you the latest news from Rome, received at Columbia's newsroom in New York. The High Command communique asserted today that 10 British bomber and fighter planes were shot down by Italian aircraft while attempting to bomb Italian troops marching along the Libya-Egypt frontier. The conservative newspaper Corriere della Sera of Milan said today that Italy's main objective in the war is control of the Suez Canal, Great Britain's lifeline to her African colonies. Other newspapers recently emphasized Italy's important role in the German-Italian invasion of the British Isles and that she would give Spain important help in conquering Britain's Mediterranean fortress at Gibraltar. The Milan newspaper indicated that Italy's activities in North Africa are only beginning and that they had been curtailed because of the summer heat. The newspaper asserted that Italy was aiming her strongest blows at the British-controlled Suez Canal sector, adding that once cracked in the canal zone, the British power on the African continent will rapidly become weak, bringing about collapse in all other sectors. For the first time, Italy's claims in Palestine were disclosed by the newspaper Regime Fascista of Cremona. In Jerusalem next year, the newspaper headlined, adding that Rome will undertake liberation of the Holy Land. The newspaper said, "For Catholic Italians, the problem of the Holy Land is open and deeply felt. The war against Great Britain has served to reopen this question. The profane and ruthless exploitation of the Holy Land must cease. The Catholicism of the Italian people gives them a moral right. And this also is the historic right of the House of Savoy, which carries the title King of Jerusalem. It is not the first time that from the ardent faith of the Duce, Premier Benito Mussolini, that through the triumph of Italian arms, that hope has been raised for the promised liberation of the land of Jesus from the grip of Anglo-Jewish control." The newspaper Popolo di Roma commented on the arrest of Japanese subjects in Great Britain, saying that the British government is taking revenge against Japan by ordering the arrest of imminent Japanese subjects. Undoubtedly, the British government has only one object, that of having all the world against England. Did not her priceless Minister of Information, Alfred Duff Cooper, say that England never fought so well as when alone? We are sure that England will attain blissful solitude, but we are not equally sure that England will like it so much. Diplomatic sources believe that the arrest of Japanese subjects in Britain would serve to bring closer the ties of the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo axis. The New York correspondent for the Rome newspaper, Messaggero, reported today that the formation of a political party of true Americans in the United States by Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh. Commenting on the party, Guido praised Lindbergh's stand and lauded his initiative, saying it represented the logical and sane reaction of the best part of United States public opinion against the Democratic and Republican Party platforms. He added that it was a definite proof of the tendency in the United States toward isolationism. The formation of a new party organized by Lindbergh proves 3 points. Firstly, that a large part of the people of the United States are dissatisfied with the Democratic and Republican Party platforms. Secondly, that in view of the formation of a new Europe resulting directly from the present conflict, the United States will be forced to re-examine their position, and this cannot be done by the men presently in power, nor by those who desire to go. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.